What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is Radical Health, and today we are going to be looking at this text. This is a continuation of one of the previous videos, the life science health system, and I have my good friend with me today to discuss this together. So, Blake, welcome, and how are you?
Seth, hey, how are you, man? Thank you so much for having me on the show. I love how you share the natural hygiene knowledge, and I love how you're helping myself and a lot of other people who are in your school community work through this like 2,000 plus page text. And I think today we're on lessons 3 and 4, and these are some of the really pivotal lessons in the book. So, man, I'm super excited to get into it.
Right on. Yeah, these are some pretty foundational chapters here. I love the first few chapters of this text because it really does lay down a strong foundation. And with holistic health, there's so many variables to keep in check. And I think they do a pretty good job of outlining, everything we need to be conscious of, but maybe not everything, because, as great as this text is, and as much as I love the life science health system, I'm not dogmatic. We're not dogmatic. We're always learning more. We're always staying open to what we can glean elsewhere from other health systems as well. And I think, we'll use this time just to toss the ball back and forth and maybe use the text to discuss some of our some things we have going on, because I want to drop the hint. We won't discuss it right now, but Blake just completed a week-long dry fast. And so we're going to discuss that as we enter the topics of air and water. And but I just want to drop that now to let you guys know, stay tuned, and let's dive in here.
Let's do it.
Let me share and present this book. Y'all, SethBailin.com/library is where you can download this PDF. It's 2,300 pages, but one-click download, and it's on your device, and you can search it and reference it whenever you need to, whenever you have a question. So here's the table of contents. Last video, I discussed the introduction to life science and the nature and purpose of disease. So those two are very foundational to sort of get the grasp, get the idea, and the basis of what is life science, what is natural hygiene. So definitely go check that video out if you haven't already. And we're going to explore, like we said, chapter 3 first.
Introducing the life science system for perfect health, part 1, the essentials of life listed. And this is how you were saying it's so foundational and fundamental to get these big ones down pat. And I do think that they do a great job with giving an overview, especially considering that this work is over 2,000 pages. It's like a greatest hits of all the hygiene knowledge. But at the same time, like you said, Seth, we're not dogmatic, and there's a lot more variables even now than there were back in their day with more industry, more technology. So I'm super excited to hear your take on these essentials.
Absolutely. So lesson 3 is all about air and water. Those are the two most essential nutritive needs of human beings. I think I would agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
We are made of air. Classic quote from Arnold Ehret is that humans are air gas engines. And I mean, we are made of mostly water. It's interesting, if you look up the constitution of the human being and say, like, what percent water is a human being, it will tell you a pretty wide window. There's no one answer. It's not 75% water. It's not 80% water, but the window can actually vary from between like 60 and 80% water. And to me, that signifies a big swing in the condition of human beings, that some people can be very dehydrated and others can be more toward the normal, fully hydrated human condition. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I typically run in the low 60s percentage wise. And don't quote me on this, but I think a newborn baby is around 75%. And then when you look at people as they become dehydrated or as they age, they're getting into the low 50s. And if you just want to make a sweeping, broad conclusion from that, is that as you age or as you become less healthy, you're becoming less hydrated. So you could say that one is the cause of the other, or that there's a strong correlation there, which there are a lot more factors going into it, but it's still a huge good idea, let's say, to stay as hydrated as possible.
Right on. Now, this is a fundamental tenet that gets discussed deeper in the first couple chapters, but I really want to emphasize it. When in a state of disease, most people do not realize they have brought it upon themselves. So this is a fundamental thing about natural hygiene and life science, that there's a level of responsibility that one must take when considering their own health and their own condition. Western medicine teaches us to point the blame externally and say, this got me sick. I caught this from over here, and rarely do they look at their own lifestyle under a microscope and say, how could I have caused this inadvertently? So this is a fundamental thing that we come back to in many lessons, that we can't really place blame outside of ourselves. This is a self-responsible type of healing system. And they list the 19 factor elements for optimal well-being. And right at the very top, we have pure air and water. And I'm just going to go ahead and read the rest. I wonder what you guys listening think about this. Are they missing anything? Do you generally agree with all these? And yeah, my big question is, what's missing from this list? So the 19 factor elements for optimal well-being, where any lack of one of these, if it's not filling our need, can cause illness. Pure air, pure water, cleanliness, internal and external, sleep, temperature maintenance, pure wholesome food to which we are biologically adapted, exercise and activity, sunshine upon our bodies, rest and relaxation, play and recreation, emotional poise, security of life and its means, pleasant environment, creative, useful work, self-mastery, belonging, motivation, expression of the natural instincts, and indulgence of aesthetic senses. I like that last one. It really taps into, I guess, the human need for beauty and aesthetics. That's a natural inclination for humans. He does dive into that deeper in chapter 4. But let's talk about air, man. Just the number one, pure air. You just underwent a dry fast, longer than any others that I've heard about from any of my friends. So 7 days. Do you have a different relationship now with air, that was your primary fuel for, well, it's primary fuel for everyone, but it was your only fuel. So for a week, has your relationship with air changed? Have you become more sensitive to it? Give us a little bit of your thoughts into air since having completed this dry fast.
Yeah, well, one of my friends recently said that air could be transposed with the word consciousness. If you're not breathing in air, then you become unconscious. And that's kind of an oversimplification, but you could think of air as the number one substance or quality that keeps us conscious, that keeps us awake, that keeps that stream of consciousness, our soul, our spirit, however you want to describe that, plugged into our physical vessel. When upon death, when that connection is severed, our body doesn't just cease to exist. Our deceased body is still there and intact, but it's just not animated anymore. It's not animated by our spirit, our soul. And so in order to keep that connection going, we have to breathe. And during the dry fast, I noticed just how much energy we get from the breath. The only thing that was starting to weigh upon me towards the end of my fast was a bit of dehydration, obviously. But as far as energy goes, I mean, Seth, you and I were riding bikes around. We were out on the boat, going on the beach. I mean, I was doing all sort of crazy things, and I don't recommend that anybody do that while they're dry fasting. And in fact, I think that was a mistake of mine. I wasn't going to miss hanging out with you for the world, so of course I had to come and hang out. But next time I will plan it better, and I will plan on being in a more calm environment where I'm not, moving around a lot, and then I'll be able to conserve more water and everything like that, and focus more deeply on the breath work. I noticed that when I was doing the pranayama, man, that just supercharged me with energy. And yeah, to just cap off my response to you before I kick it back to you is that energy was not an issue at all. I had unlimited energy, and even when my body was becoming dehydrated or a little bit lethargic, depending on how scientific you want to get, if it was like electrolytes running low or whatever. I remember on day 7, I had an 1.5 hour long conversation with a friend, like on the couch, and we were just like chatting back and forth like it was nothing. And I had this realization that, my mind is completely plugged in. My brain is completely there. My soul, my spirit, my energy, the animation force of my physical vessel is completely tapped in and plugged in. There was no like brain fog. There was no obsessions of eating food. I was even watching some cooking shows. I'm mostly a raw foodist, but I do like some of the vegan cooking stuff and Indian cooking. And in the first couple of days that I was doing that, I definitely was like, man, I could go for some curry right now. But then towards the end of my fast, I was just completely detached. I know that's a bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to describe to the audience that the power of air is directly tied to your consciousness. And that is a subject or a practice that I'm extremely excited to keep exploring further.
Yeah, man, I like how you brought it there. We can see here that they listed air as 78.1% nitrogen, 20.9% oxygen, and what constitutes air. But air carries that spirit, right? It carries that spirit of life, prana, and there's something connected to consciousness there. So there's no question as to why they put air at number 1. It's the most vital thing that we have. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, humans, according to Arnold Ehret, from his perspective, are an air gas engine that our business is in combusting oxygen and potentially utilizing this nitrogen as well, because air is mostly nitrogen. So, aside from the chemical reactions that are happening on a cellular level, there might be something deeper going on as it pertains to the soul, the spirit, and some of the more subtle energies out there.
100%.
So, yeah, a big lesson to take away from this chapter 3 here is that a lot of air is polluted. And it's so hard to tell because it's invisible, right? You can have carbon monoxide poisoning. You can have pollution from industrial areas in the city, pollution from cars, tire dust getting kicked up. Now, keep in mind, this was written in the 80s, and much of what he's saying is true, but you got to think about how much worse it might be now in 2025. So, I don't know if they had all the geoengineering back then, and who knows to what extent they're doing it now. We don't really know exactly what's going on up there, but if we were to remain in control of the things that we can control, then
Right.
we would, there's still ways that we can clean up our environment, clean up our air, and breathe only the best air. Number 1 for that is going out into nature, right? Hanging out with a tree. Or instead of one tree, maybe thousands of trees. Normal air is continually cleansed by forces in nature. Tobacco smoke, I think, probably was a bigger problem in the 80s because there weren't as many laws about no smoking here. and smoking indoors was extremely common. And I guess the risks weren't extremely studied or they weren't publicized. Do you remember the truth ads when we were kids? There were these TV ads that showed you the dangers of smoking. And it was kind of like a culturally new thing. You know, even in our childhood or our lifetime, they started putting black box warnings on cigarettes, you know, warnings about cancer, warnings about how smoking is not good for you. So back in the 80s, it wasn't as well known, and there's probably more tobacco smoke. But today, you know, there's all sorts of other smokes to pollute the masses, including vapes. And well, vapes are big these days. But that's not the only thing that will pollute a room. Here are some more invisible, what's the word I'm looking for? Pernicious household items that might be polluting your air. Cleansers and detergents, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide. I guess that pops up in industrial areas. But air pollution in general, you know, he mentioned Los Angeles. That's known to be a very polluted area. He even mentions New Jersey later in this chapter. And he was saying that New Jersey has the highest rate of cancer. That's not true anymore. I looked it up, and Kentucky is actually at the top. I wonder if that has to do with their mining.
Or their fried chicken.
Good point. So polishes, waxes, other household items, chlorine, and there's chlorine in most city water. So we're going to talk about that when we discuss water. But you know, even a lot of new homes have like a smell to them, and they can trigger people who are sensitive because there's all this formaldehyde and other volatile organic compounds they call VOCs off-gassing. Right. So new appliances, sometimes you want to off-gas them in your garage or outside. You know, new anything that comes from a factory. You know, if it's a product that deals with chemicals, whether that's wood or bedding, you want to try to off-gas that and clean that as much as possible. Oven cleaners, cosmetics. Now, this is a bummer because women love to use cosmetics, many of them. But, you know, you gotta accept the risks if that's a toxic substance that we're, smearing on our skin. And speaking of air, our skin is a porous, breathing organ.
Yeah.
So we sweat through it, and we off-gas our own detox through our skin. So things that we put on our skin, cosmetics, and he even mentions clothes later on in the next chapter as being potentially detrimental to health. Deodorants and antiperspirants. Now, this was one of the first things that I cut out as a young, health-seeking man. It wasn't long until I realized that putting aluminum on your skin, especially around your lymph nodes and around your breasts, and this is, starting to make the connection of potentially breast cancer in males, aluminum deodorant next to your lymph nodes. That was one of the first things that I cut out before I started changing my diet. And it just bums me out thinking about all the chemical company products that they put out for us in the name of health, in the name of smelling good, in the name of attracting a mate, and it's an anti-perspire. We're talking about air and breath. That's what spire means. That's what the root of the word spire is. So when your skin is breathing, you're perspiring and sweating, is anti that. So this is an anti-normal body function gel. That's what antiperspirant is.
Oh, why are we sweating so much in the first place? I remember I was a bit self-conscious in like middle school, high school, because maybe that's still why I wear black all the time, because you get those sweat marks on your shirt. If you're wearing like a medium colored shirt, like a tan shirt or a red shirt, and you're sweating profusely, that's a result of your health. That's a result of your diet, your fitness, and also like your mental health. Are you a nervous person? Are you, do you have some social anxiety? What's causing you to perspire so much? Let's not look at the quick fix of just putting on some antiperspirant. Let's go down to the root cause. And I think TC Fry, the other natural hygienists, are on the same page with getting the lifestyle correct and fixing these issues at the root cause. But I remember just being so like, oh my God, people are gonna see that I have, these wet armpits. So I would try all sorts of different deodorants and the clinical grade ones and stuff like that. But and also you don't want to smell bad. So there's a lot going into it. But could you imagine, just putting these chemicals right by your lymph nodes, like you said, Seth? I mean, that is terrible.
Yeah, and there used to be a lot more spray varieties of antiperspirants, and they were breathing that in, and it's caking it's lining our sinuses. So definitely, let's look at the root causes of why we're sweating excessively. Do you have too much weight on you? And then when you align with the natural diet, you actually smell way less. So I noticed that in myself. I mean, I think anyone who goes into the natural food diet, high raw vegan or raw vegan, fruitarian, and something close to that, will know that body odor is a result of what we eat.
100%. I like not smelling bad.
I love not smelling bad. Yeah. Yeah. Insect repellents, different perfumes and powders, carpeting. I wish things like carpeting weren't potentially toxic, but you never really know where they're made, how they're made, what types of chemicals they have to apply to them for them to be either water resistant or fire resistant. On a lot of these beddings and clothings and carpetings, you can see where it'll tell you like, this violates the California law for carcinogens, law E60, whatever it's directing you to, telling you there are toxic materials in this. And, they're telling us, so it's somewhat transparent, but it's really up to us to keep our environment as pristine as possible, keep that air clean.
Yes.
Oh, volatile oils. Okay, this is interesting. He's talking about from mustard oil, onions, garlic, and other pungent herbs, teas and drinks, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's one class of volatile oils. Then there's the oils of frying food that he says coat your lungs, and that people who operate fryers, like here in this paragraph, people who work in kitchens who fry food, even if they do not smoke, are likely to have lung problems faster than those who smoke. So if you're constantly frying and browning and stuff in your house and there's smoke being created, we're breathing that in. That's going to take us further from the pristine environment.
100%. I have a friend who's one of the best cooks I've ever known, but just has a tendency to use the absolute highest heat. And I remember just coughing when they were cooking, and cooking those pungent things as well, and using oil and garlic and onions, and they weren't coughing at all because they were already used to that. So I was like, whoa, can we turn the heat down a little bit? It's definitely not good to be breathing in those fumes like that, even though it might smell good.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too when I became more sensitive to, air in general, through not eating fried food, through not eating heavily cooked food, not breathing in that smoke anymore. When it would happen and I would share a kitchen, I would be way more sensitive to it. So it's interesting that you build up a tolerance and you don't even notice it when you're consuming that all the time or you're around it all the time.
Yeah.
Alcohol, he's talking about not even just drinking it, but just breathing it in, breathing in the fumes. Condiments, seasoning, spices, sauces, gravies, cooking, brewing, boiling, baking of foodstuff. So here he's talking about not just fried food and not just burnt things, but cooking in general, even boiling, baking, brewing. He says cooking destroys foodstuffs and much of their substance is passed off into the air during the process. Cooked foods are harmful when ingested. Now, this is something that we question, for the most part, we can see how this is true, how all the animals eat raw food except for humans. Humans are the only animals that cook their food, and they're the only ones with human diseases. You can say the same thing for domesticated cats and dogs, and we're also feeding them cooked food. But I'm not actually convinced yet that certain lightly cooked foods are harmful. Cooked foods are harmful when ingested. I want to challenge that because I'm just not convinced. I mean, I get it. I feel differently when I'm eating cooked food. But are there some that are benign? Are there some that are biostatic? Are there some that that you can eat and not reduce your vitality?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you brought up biostatic from Edmund Bordeaux's AK. That's something that you taught me when we were studying the Seeing Gospel of Peace, that you have these classifications of food that is harmful, food that is neutral, and food that is helpful to the body. And we've been talking about Arnold Ehret as well. He's got the mucusless foods, and not even all raw foods are considered mucusless. You know, if you've got raw fats, avocados, nuts, those tend to be mucus forming in the body. And his philosophy is you don't want to introduce any obstruction into the system. And just to throw my own challenge out there as well, is that if we were these perfect air gas engines, which, you know, it's pretty much impossible to do that right now with the environment and with just all the degradation of our I guess our genetics or our DNA over generation and generation and generation of passing down these genes that have been adapted to cook foods and unhealthy environments, that anything you introduce into your body at all could be seen as an obstruction. So then it's like, now we have this like food pyramid of, you know, what's the least harmful? Air, and then water, and then it's like fruits or fruit juices, and then maybe vegetables, and then maybe now we get into some of the cooked foods, the cooked vegetables, the cooked fruits, and then now we get into the starches and legumes. And I think some people would even put meat a little bit higher up than some of the grains and some of the starches. But I agree with you, Seth. It's how much have humans adapted to eating cooked food, meaning our biome, because it's been shown in research that it only takes, I mean, sometimes one generation for there to be a big adaptation. Now, is it a good adaptation or is it like a maladaptation? You know, it just depends on how you look at it. But I do think that we have, I hate to use the word evolved, I guess adapted is probably the better word, to subsist on these different things. But that's these cooked foods, but that's also could be causing some downstream problems with shorter lifespan and sensitivities, hormonal regulation, the endocrine system not functioning as well. So, you know, it might be very hard for somebody to be a full raw foodist. And so, you know, what do you do for that person? I know that personally for myself, I'm still adjusting my body to be more and more raw. I've been mostly raw this entire year, but I noticed that when I introduce like cooked legumes or some tofu into my diet, I'm able to just pack on freaking muscle like nothing, as opposed to the raw foods. And I've tried sprouts, I've tried more avocados and nuts and everything like that. But that seems to be what works best for me. But that's after 38 years of being a cooked foodist. And that's after, I don't know, I'm a 6th generation Minnesotan. I don't know how long my family's been cooking for. Probably eons and eons and eons of us cooking our food to live on it. So it would be, I think, foolish to think that we haven't adapted at least a little bit to cooked foods. Maybe in some ways good, and maybe in some ways bad.
That's great. Great nuance there. Because, yeah, I agree. The adaptation that humans have underwent over the last, whatever, say 1,000 years, 2,000 years, whatever you want to call it, maybe even longer. Some people say millions. We can't just write that off and say, oh no, we're designed to eat raw food. You got to switch over. And then to say, that steamed sweet potato is going to be harmful for somebody, especially if they're trying to come off of a diet of, burgers and fries and beer, switching to a cooked broccoli, sweet potatoes, cauliflower, maybe some beans, to blanket call that harmful might actually be causing too much fear in someone and not allowing them to use maybe from Arnold's canon, transition food toward a raw food diet. And I think if it's leading you toward a better place away from foods are harmful, then maybe they serve a purpose for a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, air pollution, we want to just avoid that. We want to be outside as much as possible. Keep your windows open. Exercise. Now, this is one of Blake's favorite activities, and lately it's been one of mine. I love getting exercise. But here they write, exercise ventilates our entire body. Run, jog, or walk. Play an outdoor sport. Any sustained activity that greatly accelerates body function will ventilate your system. Especially important is the oxygenation of our capillary system, which results from exercise. And capillaries are basically our smallest blood vessels. So it's the blood vessels at the very end of the branches, and they're extremely small. And, to get oxygen into them, we need to be pumping. We need to be pumping our muscles and blood system and lymphatic system. It's all connected. I'll breathe better after I work out, much, much deeper. Every breath feels like you're eating more of the air. Yeah. What do you have to say about exercise as it relates to ventilating our body?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up, this is a good opportunity to bring up mold too. He's probably going to talk about mold, but Seth and I both live in Florida. Florida is obviously very hot and humid most of the year. And the apartment that I live in, I'm sure there's mold or mildew or something like that. Pretty much any building, is going to have a slight degree of mold. So in case TC Fry talks about it further later, I won't go too far into that. But I've taken extreme measures to keep my apartment mold free. I've bought some dehumidifiers, some big ones. I have 3 of them. I keep them running in the summer so I can keep my air ventilated through the windows without it getting too hot and humid in here. I've also used an ozone filter. So it's a lot better than it would be if I wasn't living here, and obviously keeping the air conditioning low as well. But when I go to the gym and I get a sweat in, or I go outside and I get a run in, I can feel that process ventilating out the old air that I have been breathing. And I don't know a great way to describe that process, but in my mind, it's just like I'm exchanging my air. It's like I've been sleeping in my apartment for 8 hours. I get up, I go for a jog. That's 8 hours of me breathing in the air that's in this enclosed space with not only my own, carbon dioxide and whatever stuff that I'm breathing out and eliminating from my body via the breath, but also, as you mentioned, the volatile compounds, anything that's off-gassing, and then also the mold. And so I just feel like it just exchanges my air. It's almost like whether it's the oxygen or whether it's some of the other elements like nitrogen, hydrogen that you talked about being in the air, that our body exchanges. And I think that it's extremely poor. I think it's one of my keys to success that I didn't even realize I was doing it, because I would always do jogging pretty much every day. But I think that if we don't exchange our air often or ventilate our body via the breath, whether it's breath work or exercise or whatever, then that's almost like if you don't let clothes dry all the way and they start to get a funky smell or something like that. You need to be always maintaining that and exchanging your air out, or else I think it gets stagnant inside of you, and that's one of the underlying causes of toxicity and health problems.
100%. If you're feeling stagnant out there, if you're feeling the air a little stale, Just go outside, go for a run, go for a jog, go for a bike ride, do your jumping jacks if you have to. Whatever's fun for you. I think this took me a minute to really accept, was that you don't have to go and force yourself to do exercise that you don't want to do. It should always be fun. So if you like climbing trees, climb trees. If you like rebounding, do that. Whatever's fun to you. If we're forcing ourselves to get out there and do something because we think it's good for us, it's not going to connect with you as much as something that you actually enjoy to do. So find out what that is. If it's dancing, biking, you got to have something. There's no excuse. You got to be active, right?
For Seth, it's doing like 30 pull-ups like it's no issue at all.
Well, you got me on the, I've always been into calisthenics. You did give me a plan that was a little more focused, and I've been working it and definitely seeing the results. So yeah, for anyone that needs a workout plan, hit up Blake Herrick. Yeah, here's where he mentions New Jersey being so polluted that it yields a lot of big C cases out there. So now we're on, I'm glad you mentioned mold too, because mold is another invisible killer out there that a lot of people deal with. South Florida, humid places, I always got to have the dehumidifier running. And that might be something that's affecting your health. Now, I saw recently, I love Dr. Fred Bishy. He's a 96-year-old raw vegan health coach. He's been eating raw food for, I don't even know, 70 years or something like that. Someone recently asked him what he thinks about mold. And his first answer was, get out of the place that has the mold. Like, you can try to detox it or remove it, but for the most part, you got to remove yourself from that environment and get to better air. So I'm not well versed in the methods of testing air. I know there are different ways to do that, but there's also air purifiers. He mentioned the negative ion generator in the other one. You mentioned the ozone generator. There's different ways to clean the air. Look into it. It's the most important thing to our health. But we just want to present that as an overview for, invisible things that might be keeping you from achieving your best health. Now, water. This is the other half of chapter 3, where similarly to air, we want the pure version, right? We want the one that is pure without contaminants. And that the more contaminants are involved, the more we're going to get backed up and congested. So TC Fry and a lot of the natural hygienists, they're really into distilled water. However, they de-emphasize water altogether and question whether or not humans are even water drinking species. And they contend, and I pretty much agree with this, that when you have a diet of natural, raw fruits and vegetables, an abundance of plant foods, and you're feeling good, that you shouldn't need to drink water. And I think in an ideal situation, that probably is true. However, like you were talking about before, we've adapted to some pretty grave conditions as humans in 2025. We got a lot going on in here. A lot of people are facing dehydration. A lot of people are facing, old stuck waste in the GI tract that needs to get rehydrated. And that's why I promote a lot of water drinking. I love water drinking. I'm a big, big fan. But just know that in this text, it is de-emphasized a little bit in favor of the water in fruits, which is completely pure and without any trace of inorganic minerals. So that's the other thing we want to look at, the distinction between organic minerals and inorganic minerals. According to this text, it's organic minerals that come from plant sources and that our body can assimilate easily. It's inorganic minerals that are there through pollution, that are there through just being dissolved in there, or being added in to our water supply in the case of like chlorine, fluoride, things like that. I think we're going to do a little investigation of our water quality. So there's 2 ways you can do this to find out your water quality. Blake, I want to start with what you got. So Blake has a TDS meter. This is a total dissolved solids meter. What it does is it measures conductivity between 2 metal prongs. Can you show us the metal prongs on the bottom? Yep, there's 2 prongs right there. And as they both connect to a source of water, it's going to run an electric charge between the two. And based on that electric charge, it estimates the amount of total dissolved solids in water. So distilled water should have total dissolved solids reading of 0, which means no dissolved solids. There's actually no electrical charge in that water, or no electrical conductivity, rather. Now, this people contend is bad. They say that's dead water, and that it's going to leach minerals from your body. And if you were to ask TC Fry, I think what he would say is that that's kind of a good thing, is that you want to leach the inorganic minerals from your body. You want the distilled water to pull out excess minerals that aren't serving you, that your body can't use anyways. So that's why he's in favor of distilled water. Now, if your water has particles in it, it's known as hard water, although there's a threshold at which the water will become hard, and that's very subjective. Blake, I'd love if we could maybe measure some water that you have right now and just let us know what kind of readings you're getting.
Oh yeah. Well, should we do the distilled water first or the tap water first?
Let's do the tap water first to show what St. Petersburg, Florida tap water reads, and then we'll measure the stuff that you steam distilled.
All right, perfect. All right, so first up, guys, this is some good old tap water. Just kidding, not going to drink that. So you just put the TDS meter in there, like Seth said. And it's pretty impressive that this thing gives a reading so quickly. And let me just try to get it to the camera so you can see what the readout is.
If you hit the hold button, it will hold the reading so you can take it out of the water.
Oh, okay.
And it'll still be on there.
Perfect. Can you guys see that okay?
So this is 197, right?
197.
So that's 197 parts per million, right? This says ppm on there, right?
Yep, it says ppm on there.
Cool. Sometimes that unit is expressed in parts per billion, but this is parts per million, and it's estimated that you have about 197 parts per million total dissolved solids in that water. That is hard water. I would put hard anything above 100 or 150. And Miami water has something similar to that. I tested it when I first moved here, but my TDS meter is out of batteries. So that's why I asked if you could bring yours. So let's test the distilled now. This is the same St. Petersburg tap water, right, that you steam distilled. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So let's see what that says. Let's see how good your distiller is.
All right, you guys. Oh, a little different from before, Seth.
Is it like 1 or 2 or 3?
Yep.
Yeah. So as a distiller, okay, it says 3. As a distiller is used, it's going to gather the sediment that is being left, as you boil off the water. So it does collect and accumulate some of the minerals. So you really got to make sure you wash the distiller. When I came and visited you, I think that was early October, the the distilled water did read 0. The TDS meter gave us a strong 0 reading, which is like perfect. Once your distilled starts to get up to 2 or 3, then you know that the distiller is not taking everything out. But that's one thing that y'all can do is go grab one of these tools. They're very, very cheap. You can find them online for like $10 or $15 or something, and just see how hard your water is. Okay, if it's over 100 or 150, you might want to put a filter on there. And I'm going to show you another way to test your water. Bear with me for 1 sec. I'm going to stop sharing this text. Okay, so you can see this website, tap water database. So this is ewg.org/tapwater. EWG is the Environmental Workers Group, and they do a lot of reporting on the quality of water and food out there. So I'm going to search my zip code. Okay. This is part of the Miami, Florida utility in Homestead. And I'm going to show you what types of contaminants are in our water, according to the Environmental Workers Group. Arsenic, 150 times the health guideline. Bromodichloromethane, 228 times EWG's health guideline. Wow. Bromoform, chloroform. Wow, there's actually chloroform in our water. Chromium, dibromoacetic acid. Wow. So a lot of these I can't even pronounce. A lot of haloacetic acids at a very high alarming rate. Radium. I don't know if that's good or bad. Oh, and uranium. So our water is radioactive, it looks like.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I want you all to do. Go to ewg.org/tapwater. Put in your zip code. And you can look at this. This is kind of scary, though. I don't like looking at this too much.
Yeah, that's why I choose to use a distiller. I know there's a lot of back and forth on what water is the best. I think there is something to be said about spring water. I think there's something to be said about the hydrogen water, and people apparently feel great drinking that. But as of for me, for right now, just for cost reasons and just for ease of procurement, I mean, I take my distiller off my countertop, I put it underneath the sink, I fill it up, press a button, and then hour and a half, 2 hours later, I have a gallon of drinking water that usually reads 0. Now, I'm wondering, since I have gotten a new distiller since then, if there's still some stuff rinsing out from the actual distiller itself, or if I just need to clean it. Because the one that I used when you were here, that one had been worn in for quite a while, and it ended up crapping out on me. So I had to buy a new one. So interesting to do that test. I'm going to clean it and see if I can get it to be 0.
Yeah, report back. Let us know, because I'm curious about that. This is a huge common question amongst people who are trying to optimize their health. What type of water do I drink? Because it all seems to be polluted. Either you drink tap water and you're calcifying our pineal gland, or we drink plastic bottled water and we're getting microplastics in our balls. There are few options left. And so steam distillation, that's what you use in your house. What I do is I buy reverse osmosis water and I go to my local grocery store to fill it up. So I have a big 5-gallon glass jar. Most of them are plastic, but you can get a nice glass one. I picked it up at this water bar in Orlando. Yeah, I just refill that. It's RO water. It tastes very pure and clean. And that's one thing that they write about in this chapter is if your water tastes good and doesn't taste like anything, then you're probably good. And then other people get spring water. So they kind of warn against that because much of the spring water in this country is hard, meaning, all right, so every type of spring water has a varying amount of minerals in it. If you go to Arkansas, for example, there's tons of springs out there, but it's very mineralized. Okay, same with other parts of the country, in the rockier places, they have very mineralized spring water. Florida spring water, I'm not going to make a generalization about all of it because it's different depending on where you go, but there's a lot of it that is low mineral content. And so the life science position on spring water is, if you're going to drink it, drink low mineral content spring water. So again, if you buy spring water or you go source it somewhere, take your TDS meter, stick it in there. Anywhere between 30 and 90 is generally, I would consider low mineral content, or between 30 and 60. And then you're getting into, between 90, 150, you're getting into a bit higher. And then above 150, you have hard water straight up.
And this goes back to what you were talking about with organic versus inorganic minerals. We're getting the organic minerals. Basically, the plants have drank that hard water. And then they've done their processing in their plant bodies. And only through that process are we able to then assimilate those minerals as easily or as readily. Or and another way to say that is that's the way that we are designed to intake minerals. And since today's discussion is all about natural hygiene, how can we not bring up one of the OGs himself, Hilton Hotima, and his famous book, Man's Higher Consciousness? He studies health and he also studies longevity, and he gives the results of these studies. And there's a strong correlation between the people who consume the least amount of what he calls earthy matter, but that's also the same as inorganic minerals, and longevity. So even if you're drinking spring water, you're taking in those inorganic minerals. And according to Hilton Hotima in his great book, then that's going to be a precursor to a shorter lifespan. Remember, anything that we put in our body has to process and put in and eliminate. So the less that we put in, the less we have to eliminate. That's the less work that we have to do. And that's why restricted calorie diets lead to longer life, restricted protein leads to longer life, and from what Hotima is saying, restricted earthy matter, as he calls it, or minerals. So when I see people popping all these supplements or taking too much stuff, then I'm starting to think to myself, I'm relatively new to the subject, but I'm really starting to think about how that's the truth to that. And it makes perfect sense. So I think that with the RO water that you're doing, Seth, and in the glass jar, I think that's brilliant. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to do it, or the best way to do it. And then it's a little bit easier for me to do the distiller, but I think the results are pretty similar. If you use a TDS meter and you check how many parts per million you're getting in your water, making sure that it's not hard. That's one of my only arguments against like the hydrogen water and the charged up water, is because in order for them to create that, they have to put there has to be minerals in that water. So then you're ingesting that stuff. So I think ideally that our species at one point in time, we inherently knew this without any sort of scientific backing, and we would probably rarely drink water, and we would get most of our water quality or most of our water quantity from that which we ate. And just real quick before I kick it back to you, Seth, I was monitoring my water percentage throughout my dry fast, and you'd think it would be going like low, 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 low. And granted, I was losing weight and losing water weight. The actual percentage of my body that was water, according to my bioimpedance scale, was going up from the low 160s, 61, 61.2, 61.5, 62, 62.5, 62.7. And that also ties into what you were talking about, is the porousness of the skin. We're able to absorb moisture through the air. And so there's the water thing is a big thing, because it could be your biggest friend and your saving grace, or you could be slowly poisoning and bogging down your system and leading to a shorter lifespan if you're taking in too many of these dissolved solids.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to read a little passage from this book called The Miracle of Fasting by Paul Bragg. And in addition to Hilton Hotima's Man's Higher Consciousness, this is another great resource where he really favors distilled water, and it tells you why he doesn't like hard water. So I'm going to read this one paragraph. I was reared in a part of Virginia where the drinking water is called hard water. It is heavily saturated with inorganic minerals, especially sodium, iron, and calcium. I saw many of my adult relations and friends die of kidney troubles. Nearly all of the people were prematurely old because the inorganic minerals would collect on the inner walls of the arteries and veins, causing them to die with hardening of the arteries. And then he recounts a personal story. One of my uncles died at the Great Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, when he was only 48. The doctors who performed the autopsy after death stated that his arteries were as hard as clay pipes because they were so corroded with inorganic minerals. So distilled, I like distilled personally. I like very low mineral content water, and that's what the national hygienists promote. However, they don't even promote drinking a lot of water. I want to get to the part where we challenge the idea that humans are even drinking species. So here, 3.3.2, chemicals used in water purification are toxic. Fluorine, yes. Fluoride. Actually, this year we had a big push toward the eradication of fluoride in our drinking water in Florida. Big thanks to Justin, We Are Change. He lobbied a lot of the government and sent tons of letters and mobilized people through social media to get in touch with their local government. So many local governments took out fluoride from the drinking waters this year. So that's big news. I guess it's kind of like, why didn't we do that before? You know, we're catching up to somewhere we should have been years and years ago, but better late than never.
Better late than never. That's good news.
And then this is really just what I was just talking about. Those who drink mineral containing water are often found to have heavy plaque in their systems. So it's rejected minerals, which the body cannot use. If that's coupled with a high fat diet, that the minerals actually mix and congeal with the fat and the cholesterol and create an even worse recipe for disaster. But here, T.C. Fry asserts, if we're eating the diet to which we're biologically adapted, we do not have to drink water, except for when you're doing physical labor in hot weather. And cooked food eaters require copious amounts of water. Now, you'll notice this. If you go on a raw food diet, you will notice that you just aren't thirsty like that. You know, but whereas if you're eating salt and cooked food and grains and things like that, your body needs water.
Right.
So, y'all, I recommend reading the articles at the ends of these chapters. John Tilden, total legend on the importance of pure water. Definitely worth a read. We're going to skip through it. Definitely they go into the hard water thing again. Here we go to the article, Are Humans Drinking Creatures? So, dude, do you have any thoughts about this? Because he says that like our machinery, our tools don't even really allow us to drink that easily. You know, we got to bend down in an uncomfortable position to even stretch our neck out to the lake. And a lot of times the lake water is not even clean. And we can't hold water in our hands for too long before it slips out the cracks. So what do you think about that, bro?
I do tend to, like, just my first response, and this is, by the way, just, I know you already know this, Seth, and just for the audience, I operate on working hypotheses. That's my term for it. I have no hard, fast beliefs about pretty much anything. And my hypotheses are, or theories, or whatever you call them, are always subject to be upgraded and changed at any point in time. I keep an open mind and a beginner's mind, especially with this knowledge. But my instinct right now tells me that there's definitely truth in the idea that perhaps earlier versions of humans were entirely breatharian, where we were subsisting off of prana alone, meaning we didn't need to eat or drink. How I was feeling on my dry fast that I just did, it really started to show me that that's possible. And even how I'm feeling now, it's been a couple days since I broke the fast, and I still kind of feel in this etheric realm a little bit, and it's a different sort of feeling. It's a good feeling, but it's definitely a different sort of feeling. I think I tapped into some sort of different energy. I agree with the biological, physiological structure of our body not being the best built to drink water, and that makes perfect sense. We are built perfectly to harvest fruit, or to use our hands to grab fruit, to grab vegetables, and then get water from that. But this goes back to the real food pyramid that I was talking about earlier, with air at the top, then water. And you could argue that you could just skip the water part of the pyramid and just put fruit in enough quantity that it just hydrates your cells. But I mean, again, not to harp on this, but I kind of didn't think it was possible to survive 7.5 days without any sort of water intake. And you think that somebody would just shrivel up and die, but watching the number on the scale, watching the hydration percentage, watching my weight, and just feeling how I was going throughout my business, it would be hard for me to deny the fact that I was still somehow getting water into my system. I think through the skin, yes, but I think through the breath, Seth. Like, I think you breathe in a lot of moisture through the breath. And one last thing that I'll say is that, pertinent to a dry fast, and then try to take this tidbit and then correlate it to just normal life. Because during a dry fast, you're not taking in water, your body produces this hormone called antidiuretic hormone, and it prompts your body to create new water, endogenous water from your fat cells. Your body is in ketosis already, meaning it's burning fat. And the byproducts of the lipolysis, which is the breaking apart of the fat cell, combine with the air that you're breathing to create new H2O. So can we create our own water endogenously without having to consume water by drinking it, or without even having to consume anything? I think the body is more magical and amazing and incredible than we give it credit for. And the more that we open our mind to that, then the boundaries and limits start to become just blurry lines, or we just start to erase them altogether. However, I still do think that we live in a physical realm, and it's good to abide by the hygienic principles, such as the inorganic minerals, the hard water, breathing clean air, because we don't want to create any more obstruction in our vessel.
Yeah, cool input. I was going to ask too, until you mentioned it, about fat cells turning into water. So I think the answer is yes. Our body definitely can produce endogenous water. But the question is, is that the ideal water source for everybody? Probably not. I think people do need a lot of external water. Blake, you lived for 7 days without water or food, but I don't know if many people can do that. That's a pretty advanced thing, and props to you. I just want to make it clear that I'm not promoting that. I'm very, very into water. I think when you're dealing with healing and you want to, well, I'll just speak for myself. What I noticed when I started drinking a gallon a day was my asthma basically disappear. Skin issues get so much better. Sleeping even get better. Except if you're peeing a lot during the night, that can be a problem. But just the extra water that I was taking in, really, I feel like was helping my body detox itself. They say the solution to pollution is dilution. So, yeah, if there's any sediment, any acids in our body, any even, things that inflammation usually takes care of, like broken blood vessels, things like that in the case of an injury, extra water is going to come and help mobilize that out of your body, mobilize that through your lymphatic system and clean things out. So I do think that water is going to help us detox, if I was to make a generalization. And then also looking forward to your point about the magical nature of human beings, breatharian in the past, in the future, totally within the realm of possibility. The raw food community is divided on this, by the way. A lot of people think that the whole even talking about breatharianism is dangerous. But then there's this other faction that's fascinated by it and by eating less. And, we see eating less associated with longevity. So it kind of begs the question, are we eating ourselves to death?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree, Seth, that the water is going to flush out all that stuff. One of our mutual friends, Jerome Shaw, talked about how the dry fast is like a fire and the water fast is like a dousing. And so if I wasn't able to, finally drink some water at the end of that and then flush out whatever work my body was doing during the dry period, then that stuff would still be stuck inside me. So we still need to flush that stuff out. I think the breatharian only works in a perfectly clean body to be a perfectly clean breatharian. But again, you've got some Russian people, like on the Fruitarian Paradise channel, who seem to go for ridiculous amounts of time without food, water, and even sleep. So just to cap off your point about just whether in the past we were like that or definitely in the future, just the possibilities of how magical our vessel is. I just want to agree with you there, man. It's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm constantly amazed by this body and this life. And let's just cap off chapter 3, lesson 3 of the life science health system on air and water. I think they did a great job outlining just the importance of those two, how they really occupy the top 2 placements of the necessary conditions for life: clean air, clean water. Hope you guys got out a little bit of, what we're sharing as far as tips goes, how to access the best clean air and clean water. We're going to move on to lesson 4 now. This is introducing the life science system for perfect health, part 2. And it goes all the way from cleanliness to the other aspects of life that we need, such as aesthetic well-being and beauty, and everything in between. So let's just go through and briefly mention each of these. So cleanliness outside, cleanliness inside. While there is much to be desired regarding the ways in which most people maintain external cleanliness, nonetheless, they are imbued with the necessity of a clean body, at least on the outside. However, more important than external cleanliness is internal purity. Internal filth damages the body in 2 ways. 1, it clogs us up and interferes with body processes. And 2, these contaminants are poisonous. They're toxic. So anything that alters the consistency of body elaborated fluids and compounds, anything that threatens cell well-being is poisonous and anti-vital. So clean body on the outside and the inside. The best way we can do that is through our channels of elimination. So elimination or drainage, they call it. Mm-hmm. Okay, elimination is the sequel of feeding or alimentation. So once we eat, our body breaks all that stuff down. We got to get rid of it. And so there are many elimination channels which we're going to look at. Now this is important. Accumulations further vitiate the elimination process until the body must undertake an eliminative crisis to free itself of its morbid load. So this is the big tenet of natural hygiene, that we just accumulate toxins and contaminants all day pretty much. And then there's a certain threshold that'll be hit in the body where the body decides, all right, time to take all this trash out. You've given me too much. It is time for a house cleaning. And the body will choose and when to initiate this process. You can even see that in the language. The body must undertake an eliminative crisis. There's another word for symptom, dis-ease. We call that healing crisis or eliminative crisis. And it's a crisis because it doesn't feel good, right? It looks bad. It doesn't feel good. All the toxins are being dumped out of one area. And it feels like a crisis, but really it's helping us because this is the body's cleaning process. So the body's on a daily cleaning process. I highlighted these pink numbers, the pink highlights here. That's a misprint. It should say PM. So the body passes through rather distinct cycles daily. This is the 24-hour cycle for humans, roughly speaking. I know time zones can change, but think about this in rough terms, plus or minus a few hours on either side. So 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., I'm starting with the middle one. Midday to 8 p.m. is the alimentary phase, where we're best suited to be eating and taking in energy and utilizing energy from food. After that, from 8 to 4 is the assimilative. That's when our body actually is really breaking all this stuff down and using it. And then from 4 a.m. to 12 a.m. is the eliminative phase, which, you know, most people have to have a bowel movement when they get up in the morning. You can kind of see that our bodies do try to eliminate early in the morning through not just that main detox channel, but our skin, our breath, and more, which we're going to look at. We're going to look at these primary organs of elimination here. So the lymphatic system, they chemicalize wastes in such a manner as to render them less toxic in preparation for expulsion. And the lymphatic system you can think of as the sewer system of the body. It takes crap out, and it needs to be stimulated through exercise. So the more we exercise, not only the more we ventilate our bodies, but the more we pump our lymph and get the detox moving. So the liver is a huge detoxifier. It's the largest organ, and it does so many processes and eliminative tasks. We got to keep our liver in good condition. Kidneys, we know them as the filters, you know, the renal system. They basically filter the blood and they dump right to the bladder. The lungs, many people don't know that the lungs are an eliminative organ, that with every exhalation, we're passing off toxins that we don't want in the body, primarily carbon dioxide and other gases. You can kind of tell this, like if you're sick, your breath just gets nasty. It smells different. You can tell there's a lot of stuff coming out of the lungs, especially when you're sick.
Yeah.
And then you can see things more coming out of your skin and especially your tongue. So number 7 here, the tongue is sometimes used by the body as an extraordinary organ of elimination. And you can tell when your tongue's all white, you know, it's detoxing. Arnold Herrick calls this the magic mirror. So that when you go on a fast, you look at your tongue every day and you let it inform you how much you're detoxing, right? A really fuzzy white tongue means you've got a lot coming out. It's a good thing in that your body is actively detoxing, but yeah, I think it's a better thing when our tongue is always pink, showing that it's not detoxing heavily.
I concur.
Do you want to add anything about these organs of elimination? Anything come to mind? Bowels and colon, obviously, is like, those are the big waste channels, the bowels and the bladder.
And like you said, Seth, like we need to be moving to keep that lymphatic system pumping. There is no pump for the lymphatic system. The circulation system has the heart as its pump. Through the work of particularly, I guess, Dr. Morse, but other people have shown that the lymphatic system is super important in this process of elimination. And so let's help our body to clean itself out and to circulate this stuff so that we can eliminate these toxins. And then the other thing that I would highlight is the colon. Some people think that all disease begins and ends in the colon. And there are things that you can do to help clean out your colon: fasting, doing a juice cleanse. And then I recently did my first enema, and I waited until I felt like my bowels were completely empty so that I wasn't going to be doing an enema with perhaps some excrement in my colon. I was waiting till my colon was completely empty. I did the enema, which is just, you know, it's a process. Water goes up there and then you rinse yourself out. And it was surprisingly clean when the water came out. And so I think that was a testament to all of those measures that I had been taking, and I haven't been sick. So I think it's a good idea to follow these processes and keep yourself keep a body in motion. Keep a body in motion. Yeah.
Yeah, I even noticed that after I work out and do squats, it even gets my bowels moving. You know, our legs are coming up to our chest and sort of like pushing around the guts a little bit. That can help just get things moving, not just the blood and the lymph, but, you know, even the GI tract. And speaking of the bowels, it's so important to keep that clean. I think a lot of mental health disorders could be honestly cured, is my personal opinion, if we address the colon, if we clean out the colon. I've just seen the correlation in my own life. The dirtier my colon, the more terrible that I feel. And when you clean it out, you feel so much better. It's actually a common folk remedy. Mothers know this, or maybe they used to. I'm not sure how common this knowledge is anymore. But when a baby would have a fever, many mothers would just give the baby a little enema, and then they would release all this hot, nasty stuff, and the fever would go away instantly. So the colon is so linked to not just mental health, but physical health, how you feel. And so keep that thing clean. Obviously, a diet of fresh fruits and vegetables is going to keep it clean. But proactive interventions like an enema or a colon hydrotherapy, I would also say, has helped me a lot in life. Now, okay, supplementary organs of elimination. The body will actually choose various organs based on what's going on. So the body can cause its own ulcer or lesion for the purpose of elimination, right? It might create a lesion on the skin, and you might have like this detox happening through your skin through a lesion. Could create an ulcer in a different organ, maybe in your stomach. And then the second possibility with an ulcer is that you actually had a weakened piece of tissue, and the body said, oh, because this is weak, let's now dump toxins out of it. So this is right here. It may utilize ulcers, and by it's the body. So the body may utilize ulcers caused by tissue destruction as an extraordinary outlet, meaning tissue destruction has happened, whether that was through physical trauma or abuse or friction or as a chemical thing. The body may be like, oh, since that's already open, let's continue to dump things out there. And that's where you might start to see infections, right? So this is a very interesting explanation and a very simple explanation for infections, ulcers, lesions that won't heal. Maybe the body's just dumping out a lot of trash out of that escape hole, you know what I mean? And that once the body's done dumping the toxins and the harsh acids, the skin can heal up and that lesion will heal up. So the key to keeping the body clean is a way of life that neither distresses nor pollutes it. You don't want to keep chasing the cleanses, right? And the protocols that, what do I need to do to keep my body clean? It's not one or two things you have to do. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life, right? It's always seeking pristine environments, drinking the purest water, not eating certain things that add to accumulation, right? And eating the proper foods. So that's one thing I really love about this text is the focus and the emphasis on lifestyle and a way of life and kind of what you do day in and day out.
Seth, I will say something on that. When it comes to the cleanses and the detoxes and the liver flushes and the kidney flushes and the gallbladder flushes and all these protocols, I agree with you 100% that those we should not rely on those techniques and those methodologies to solve our problems, and with the idea in mind that now I'm just going to go back to exactly what I was doing beforehand and going to eat, going against everything that we've discussed today, eating a non-species specific diet, too much cooked foods, too much minerals, too much salt, not moving around and everything like that. But I will say that a protocol like that can be a good reset. And what I've seen for some of my clients, some of my friends, and myself as well, is if you can just drop one of like the bad habits that you had before, each time you do it, your lifestyle itself can get gradually more in alignment with these principles that we're talking about. Because when you're on one of these protocols, it almost creates a separation between your new life and your old life. It's like a bridge of sorts. And that's been something that I've been able to do. Each little fast that I do, I've been able to, get off of this type of food, or, stop eating so many nuts, or reduce my salt intake. And this goes all the way back years and years and years, when I quit my air pop popcorn, when I stopped eating, oatmeal, and, when I was able to taper down off of meat and stuff like that. So, I think it's important what you said, is that it needs to be a lifestyle, though, and that it would behoove the person to go into it knowing that it's a temporary protocol that should, not should, but that will inspire permanent lifestyle changes.
I like that. No, thanks for that clarification. And I totally agree with you that while we want to prioritize the way of life, cleanses, protocols, flushes, they can obviously help, right? I'm just trying to maybe not get sucked into like that as being the first course of attack all the time. So I like that. We're meeting somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I fully agree.
I like what you said. Let every cleanse bring you a little bit closer to your goals. Drop one thing from the old lifestyle every time you do a fast. And here they are, talking about how extraordinary fasting is for house cleaning. And I like to do fasting proactively and sort of planned out, rather than reactive and being like, oh, now I'm sick, I should fast, or oh, I ate too much yesterday, I should fast. But you still could use it that way. It's anytime we just turn off the switch for food, our body will clean itself a little more efficiently, right? We stop putting things in, it's able to take things out a little faster. Because I don't know if we mentioned this, but I try to mention this on pretty much every show I do. The body is a healing machine, like 24/7 detox. Someone might ask, how do I know if I'm detoxing? Well, are you breathing? Then you're
Right.
exhaling toxins. Did you sweat today? You're passing toxins to the skin. Did you use the bathroom? We're always detoxing. And so anytime we get to make that easier through fasting or whatever is good. But just don't get mental about it. I think that was like my main point, is like, don't get hung up
Right.
on maybe always needing to fast, or I'm never clean enough. We see that in this community, and we see orthorexia a lot of the time. We're just trying to put all the warnings out there so you guys can make the best decisions. I don't want to spend too long on the temperature maintenance stuff, but we are warm-blooded tropical creatures at heart, and we know that because we're always putting clothes and setting our heaters inside to match a warm, humid environment on our skin.
Yeah.
I noticed my health improved when I moved from the north to the south. Did you do too?
Oh yeah. Big time.
Yeah. Now here, TC Fry is asserting that deliberate cooling or heating of the body, especially towards extremes, is exhausting of nerve energy and lowers the body's functional abilities. So the sauna and the ice bath, is that fully in line with natural hygiene principles? Maybe not. Can it have some benefit for you? Probably, especially if you're Scandinavian and you're in a very cold climate. But this is interesting. I mean, I'm going to ask you, Blake, because I know you have a cold plunge and a sauna in your small apartment. What do they do for you, and what is the role of extreme temperatures in your life?
Short answer, I don't know. Just kidding. No, I mean, they make me feel great. And the reason why I was joking around with I don't know is because you hear so much different stuff. You hear that if you go into the sauna, it's going to stimulate your heat shock proteins. It's going to put you in a hormetic state, meaning it's like, you could make the argument that you would live longer if you never went to the gym, but then you're going to be not as strong in case something happens, or not as robust. So when they're talking about nerve energy and the exhausting of the nerve energy, I like to think of the concept of Jing in Eastern philosophy, that we all have a thread of life. We have an expiration date, and that the more that we exhaust ourselves or innervate, as the hygienist would call it, then we can either then we'd be shortening our jing. But the more smartly we navigate our life and our nerve energy, then we're keeping our jing very long. We have these constant drains upon that thread of life. It's the toxins in the air, like we discussed. It's the toxins in the water. And then now we're talking about even something like temperature that can be enervating. So the conclusion that I have, or the working hypothesis, as I like to say, is that this is one of the things that I do in moderation. And just to circle back to your question of why I do it and what I feel like it does for me. For one, the cold plunge, it puts me in a really deep state of meditation when I go into the cold plunge, and it just completely puts me into the present, into the now. All my busy thoughts are completely gone. I think that's incredibly healing and therapeutic, and maybe not measurable as well by science, but it could have some sort of cortisol reaction to it or whatever. I think it is stimulating to the kidneys and the adrenals and getting your norepinephrine, which is basically your adrenaline hormone, pumping. So again, you don't want to overdo that, but I think it's good to keep yourself robust in that regard.
Well, can I add something? Like, it totally brings you to the present, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're instantly breathing more consciously, deeper. And when I was doing cold plunges and cold showers, what I really got from it was being able to stay relaxed in an uncomfortable situation. And I would take that ability and that newfound strength I developed through cold plunging into other uncomfortable situations in life. And it would just help me stay relaxed, breathe, stay calm. Right. So I agree with you that there's some benefit to the cold plunge. And maybe we're not meant to never do anything enervating. Like, to
That's
me,
what I'm saying.
yeah, like a synonym of enervation is, I would say, draining the battery. So you have a nervous system, and it has a certain amount of battery energy that gets recharged while you sleep. Different activities will draw nervous system energy from the battery. Now, watching a movie on my phone or a YouTube video on my phone is going to drain the battery, will it not? But isn't that what my phone's there for? To watch a YouTube video every now and then. So I think it's okay if we draw energy out of our bodies, maybe push our adrenals a little bit, if we're going to do something that is exciting, and gives us benefit in another aspect of life. So maybe it's a trade-off. But if we're to take the strict natural hygiene approach, you want to keep a constant, comfortable temperature and not pushing into the extreme hots and colds. And I think sauna has a similar effect, just on the other side of pushing us into the presence, forcing us to breathe, and being comfortable in an extreme like that.
And one quick thing on the sauna is apparently it's really good for detox as well. With the skin being like the third kidney, it opens your pores, it vasodilates your blood vessels, and it can help you eliminate through your skin and through your sweat really well. But like you said, you wouldn't want to overdo it, because then I think that can actually negative, and this is just my thoughts on it. I think that can, if you're overdoing the sauna, then your body becomes over accustomed to eliminating through the skin, and it can downregulate your kidneys, which you do not want to do. That's just my 2 cents right now.
Interesting. No, thanks for that input. Pathological effects of clothing. Look at this. Synthetic clothing and plastics should not come into contact with the skin. I mean, listen, most of us are probably guilty of putting on a polyester piece of clothing every now and then. It's really hard, especially nowadays. I mean, this was written in the 80s, like I said, 40 years ago. Look at the clothes we have today. It's almost all plastic. just recently, maybe in the last couple of years, I started to take a close look at all the clothes I have, stop wearing the ones that are polyester, only search for cotton. I have a few linen shirts as well, which is really comfortable. That's flax. I mean, that's just a natural plant fiber. It's very light. So they definitely promote wearing porous clothing made of natural fibers only. They do also include wool in that. It is a bit of a natural fiber. If you're vegan, it may not line up with your ethics, and that's fine. I would say just look for cotton and linen. Those are the big ones for me that I look for, and they feel better. This is a cotton shirt. It feels really good.
I love that shirt.
Thanks, bro. So, and the role of sleep, this is like huge number one. And I just mentioned this, the brain generates nerve energy while you are sleeping. So sleeping is the battery recharge stage. That's when you plug your phone into the wall, let it juice back up to 100. That can only happen when you're sleeping, as far as my understanding goes. So guys, if you aren't getting good sleep, please figure out why not and see what you can do to increase it. I always prioritize sleep. I go to bed early these days. I don't like to cut corners on my sleep at all.
And the cleaner you are, not to be too orthorexic and obsessed with the cleanliness, because that's a good point to not take that too seriously when you're like, oh, I'm not clean enough, I need to fast again type of thing. But I will say that I've noticed that the sleep does get deeper. You get more amount. It's not that you necessarily need to sleep more or less. Everybody's different when it comes to sleep, but I've noticed that my sleep is deeper, and maybe I can get away with 6 or 7 versus 7 or 8. And for me, like something that I've been doing like before this this little retreat that you and I were meeting up at, I was getting up at like 5 a.m. every morning and getting a bunch of editing done on my podcast before like the day even started. And that's been hugely impactful in my life for me. So just real quick, want to throw an added incentive in there. Like sleep is so important, but if you follow these lifestyle principles that we're talking about, then perhaps you can buy a bit of your time back.
That's a good point. When we stop eating so much cooked food, we actually need less sleep. And that's one thing Grant Campbell and I discussed on our podcast episode, on Radical Health episode with Grant. He talked about how when he switched from vegan to raw vegan, he had so much more energy. He actually needed less sleep because his body naturally just had more energy. It wasn't constantly wasting it on detoxing cooked food and eliminating the cooked food. Right. And I personally can attest, I've experienced the same thing. And speaking of food and lifestyle, constitutionally, humans are frugivores.
Oh,
this is a central tenet to the life science health system. And like they say, they discuss food a lot in later chapters. So it's pretty much just an overview right here, but we are frugivores, meaning we are biologically adapted to a diet of primarily fresh, raw fruit. And why? Well, it has water, fiber, micro and macronutrients, vitamins and minerals, enzymes, life force, biophotons. Fruit's got it all. And I'm not necessarily saying that we should only stick to fruit, because I love my greens. I love my veggies. I like some roots sometimes, I will admit. So, but I do put fruit above all other foods because of its deliciousness without needing to process it. Right? I got grapes in the fridge. I got pomelo in the fridge right now. I can eat those things plain, and it's like the best flavors ever. Whereas if I'm just trying to eat a plain potato or a plain cauliflower, it's just not as delicious. So the fruits, to me, and to these natural hygienists here in the life science health system, they put fruits above all else and attest that we should really be eating primarily fruit. Without exercise, well-being ceases. So here's another reminder just to get out there and move. And then when you're done moving, you got to make sure you relax. All right. So rest and relaxation, huge. Some people are a little heavy on the rest and relaxation and rest too much. Some people are heavy on the exercise and they don't rest enough. I feel like I've been getting a nice balance lately where I'm exercising almost every day, pushing myself, but I'm also relaxing. I take the time to really chill and make sure I'm horizontal for as long as I need to feel good in a day. Do you feel like you're balanced on the exercise versus rest, or can you actually skew toward the exercise?
First off, I want to say I love how you structure what you do. Like the whole time we were hanging out, you were doing like a set of push-ups here, a set of pull-ups there, a set of squats here. You didn't need to make it like this big deal of I need to go to the gym and I need to go do my session. Get it all done with at one time. You were sprinkling it throughout, and you were doing bouts of exercise, taking a rest, and you would do this multiple times in a day. And I was just witnessing you and doing that, and I thought it was incredible. For me personally, I would like to do something more like that. Here I'm sitting at my work desk, and I will often do pull-ups. I have a pull-up bar in my room. I'll do push-ups in between. I'll do multiple workouts in a day, separated by a couple hours, whether it's yoga, biking, going to the gym. But to answer your question right now, I realized that I was not doing enough of like the strength bearing, weight bearing exercises, whether it's calisthenics or things like that. I was in like a yoga phase. I was in like a cool beach and yoga phase over the summer, and that was suiting me. But after I kind of, realized that it feels really good to do resistance exercise heavily before this last dry fast. I don't know if it was my body was able to soak up more water, or if I had more muscle on my body, or whatever was going on. But I think it has if you look at how I look now on day 2 after my dry fast, and if you look at how I look on after my first dry fast that I did, I have noticeably way more muscle mass, and the weight on the scale is the same. And I actually lost less weight throughout this water fast. So I think that with all that being said, it's important to to listen to your body and to make sure that you're doing the resistance exercises. It's very helpful.
100%. Hundo. So exercise, rest and relaxation, the tension and the release, right? We need both. Sunshine, essential. Okay. Again, humans are tropical creatures. We love the sun. Obviously, you can get too much, and we're more likely to burn the more toxins we have floating through our bloodstream. So if people think sunshine is so harmful, partially because of what's going on in our bloodstream that can burn the skin as the sunlight hits it. So with a cleaner terrain, we're going to be able to stay out in the sun longer. This is just a fact. But sunshine is good. We got to get it in our skin. And if you're not getting it in the wintertime, for those northerners, come visit us in Florida. Come get the real thing. I don't know how effective vitamin D pills are. I'm kind of thinking that maybe they're not as effective as just getting that straight up sunlight, because we are holistic beings. I don't think we're meant to really take in our needs through pills. So get that sunshine, recreation, and play. Now, as a musician, I play music, and I love that verb because it keeps me tapped into youthful energy, to play, right? To improvise, to have fun, to be spontaneous, to laugh. And I think any element of recreation and play that we can have, whether it's sports, music, some creative activity, or, role-playing games. Like I have friends that do, different LARPing and stuff like that. And it's play. I mean, they can tap into their inner child. And I don't want to understate how important that is for human beings, to just have a sense of play, just be silly, play games, have a game night, this is a huge aspect of health that I'm really glad they included.
Yeah, you're good at this one, Seth, man. You like to keep it light, and that's another big precursor to longevity and quality of life is when you're not so serious all the time. You know, there's time and place for everything, but you keep a
Yeah.
really chill vibe, man. It's a pleasure to be around you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And yeah, I can come off as very serious to some people and very intense. But I mean, when you start hanging out with me, I'm cracking jokes all the time. I keep it light. I like to be silly and play. So yeah, definitely keeping it light. Emotional and mental well-being are necessary to health. So this I like. Our division of humans into a multitude of entities, physical, mental, emotional, etc., is erroneous. Rather, we are a unitary organism with many aspects to our being. I think even just saying mental health is kind of fractionated. You know, it's so connected to our emotional health. It's so connected to our physical health that fractioning off these different sections of the human body or the human experience, you know, or the human entity, you know, it may be doing us a disservice. So the more holistic we can see, I think the more we'll start to like draw the connections between this part of my life, that part of my life, you know, this cause and that effect. So how can we see ourselves more like a unitary being than a collection of various systems, right?
Yeah, you can't isolate one from the other. And if you're having a sticking point on one, say it's the mental, and
Mm-hmm.
then try one of the others. Do exercise, get into the body. If you're having a sticking point with the emotions, you know, maybe go the spiritual route. And pulling some levers on one is going to help break free the other.
I like
I
that.
totally agree.
Like maybe even I kind of hearing to focus on a different one. Like if you're having mental anguish, like what, address the emotions, what's going on emotionally, address the physical, you know, do a detox and see if the mental state doesn't change. I like that. Since we're all connected within one unit, then obviously you pull on one string and the other thing's going to get tighter. So now this I thought was really interesting too, assurance of life and its means. And he's talking about how in the North, people are more adapted to providing for themselves. They're more provident because they have to think ahead in cold weather. And, you know, they're collecting firewood, they're collecting food, they're acquisitive, they're acquiring things, and they're providing for themselves the more north we go. Yet in the tropics, people aren't worried about that. They're not worried about collecting, hoarding, acquiring, because nature seems to provide for them on a daily basis. So another reason to come down to Florida and hang out with us. Right.
Hence island time.
Pleasant environment is necessary, obviously. Now, can you do an audit in your life and see all the environments that you're involved in? Are any of them not pleasant enough for you, right? Or any of them too low on the quality standards of pleasant environment? Are they taking away from your health? Maybe that's a job. Maybe that's a dirty room, right? An unclean kitchen. Are there any environments, dear listener, I'm just asking you to kind of, you know, draw through your life here and see, where can I improve in this department? Where can I improve my environment? It's going to make any of them more pleasant. Maybe that's get a house plant. Maybe that's just clean up this area of the house. Maybe that's I got to quit this job so I can have a job that's outside. You know, all these things that are not related to food and water, but just the energies around you. I think that's really, really important. And in here, they're talking about aesthetics and beauty, right? Humans are naturally aesthetic creatures and love beauty in everything. Beauty and environment is essential. Also, I think this is why nature is so great. It's naturally beautiful. You see a sunset, you see a mountain landscape, you see just like a green, really dark green tree against a blue sky. Like that does something to your brain, your heart. I love that. I went for a bike ride today and just looked at a lot of the fruit trees and like pulled over and just like stared at these trees, man. I love God's nature and I love seeing the beauty in it. But Blake, this one, 4.13 is, when I was reading this one hit me like really hard. Creative, useful work and its role in life. So all humans are naturally imbued to perform labors that are productive of their needs. Within complex societies where we lose sight of the products of our productive efforts, where we have been instilled with ambitions to consume without corresponding opportunities to produce, we tend to parasitism upon the productive efforts of others. So he's saying that we want to be contributing to society, and the more we do that, the less likely we are to become parasites of others in this capitalistic society. So he goes on further to say our society legalizes parasitism upon the economic body, and it breeds crime, ugliness, and poverty. Whereas if we can directly fulfill a need with our work, calling upon our innermost resources and abilities, it is much more satisfying and fulfilling, right? And then the more happy and contented we are, the healthier we're going to be. So not just the environment, but the type of work you're doing. Is it creative? Like, we're meant to be creative beings. And I know everyone has a different level of creativity that they like to output, but I do think that creativity is a central thing for all humans, and that I'm happier when I'm making things, right? When I'm making a video or a song or a book or something to read or look at, or a garden, I feel extremely fulfilled. And Blake, would you like to reflect on this section here, creative, useful work, and how do you think this plays for other people?
Yeah, just look what we're doing right now, man. We're coming together and we're sharing this good information. I feel completely in the present moment, hanging out with you and talking about this natural hygiene material. So it's going to be of service to anybody who listens to it. It's going to be of service to us, but it's also our creativity, and it's something that we're interested in. So then you have that cohesion of something that you are enjoy doing and are creative with, and then it's also of service. And you mentioned the term fulfillment. I think that's huge. So there's a myriad of benefits. It's keeping us present. It's keeping us focused. We're not thinking about the future. We're not thinking about the past right now. We're just totally diving into this stuff and geeking out and having a blast. But it's also going to have long-term payouts once we post it on YouTube, and people are going to be viewing it. So for me, what I've noticed is that, same as you, man, when I'm of service doing something that I feel I'm talented at and enjoy, that's when I feel the most fulfilled in my life.
Yeah. Being of service to others, there's nothing like that. And I wonder if there's a difference in between the sexes, because women can create a human body inside theirs and they support it. The creative force is very strong in women. With men, we don't have that type of creative energy in our bodies. I wonder if we have a deeper connection to work and creating things within our work, just to be able to have the human experience of creating something that lives in the world. Women have that ability naturally. Obviously, it takes two to create another life, obviously. But I'm just wondering if men have a similar creative urge and desire, but with work and output and other things that aren't like another human being. I was just thinking about that, because I noticed when I'm done with a project, it's almost like I get postpartum depression, where I'm like sad that I'm not nurturing the thing anymore, and it's like out in the world doing its own thing, and it's like then I go and look for another project to create, right? So I just wonder if other men have that feeling, or if women can relate to creative work and how it just serves you in your life. And do you feel better when it is of service to others?
I had postpartum today because I was like, man, I'm not fasting anymore. That journey is over. Dang it. Now I got to do something else.
Yeah.
You think that'd be the craziest thing to even think of? Like, you'd think I'd be relieved and super happy and stuff, but there's been a slight tinge of melancholy today that I'm not fasting anymore because
Well,
you're doing something, you're on a project, you're putting that work in.
right, right. And I'm sure, yeah, you'll find something to replace that. And all of this goes along the lines of self-mastery, right? Kind of working toward the control of our own self, keeping passional influences within the bounds of propriety, right? So just learning temperance, I guess, moderation, self-mastery, self-control is a huge need for well-being, a huge need for humans on the path of well-being. So if we can't control our passions, if we can't control our attachments, then they're controlling us, and we are passive NPCs at that point. So
Yep.
self-mastery, y'all. However you can do this, however you can develop willpower. And I think fasting is actually a great way to do that, especially like intermittent fasting, something easy where you can set a goal for yourself where you're turning on and off the switch for food. Some people argue, oh, that's disordered eating, but to me, it's actually like very ordered eating, intermittent fasting, and choosing a day to fast. And the more you can do these small fasts, whether it's 24 to 48 hours or whatever, the more you're going to develop willpower and ability to kind of do things that are a little uncomfortable, right? And delay that gratification.
Intermittent fasting also matches up with the time windows that TC Frog gave us for the alimentary period from
100%.
midday to the end of day. And there's something to be said about how that ties in with our natural circadian rhythm.
Yeah, man, I'm just going to go back up to that right here where he's talking about that. Yeah, there's an 8-hour eating window, the alimentary window between 12 noon and 8 p.m. That is a common eating window for many people. Like when I got into IF, intermittent fasting, 12 to 8 was good for me because I was working late nights. And so I'd wake up maybe like, 10 o'clock, a couple hours go by, have breakfast, eat for 8 hours, or within an 8-hour window. And then, I just turn off the switch for eating food. I would go play a gig at night and then just come home, go to bed. So yeah, this does match sort of the intermittent fasting idea. I don't think we're meant to be eating all the time, man. We got to turn off that switch sometimes.
100%, man. Absolutely.
All right, moving on to the last couple bits here. Gregariousness, social connection, motivation, and purpose, right? What drives you in life? Without purpose in life, there is little drive to live it. We life scientists hold that life is sacred and should be imbued with meaningfulness. So whatever that is for you guys, I sure hope you connect with and find with meaning and purpose in your life. Expression of natural instincts, aesthetic well-being. I want you guys to finish reading this on your own, or rather read all of this. See what you can find in here that we didn't talk about. There's so many details in here that we can't get to all.
These two chapters, like you said, Seth, are so fundamental. They lay the framework, and it's important to read through these. It's inspiring me to go and read through them, verbatim again, and just have that program running in the background, because it's going to help guide you along your journey as you're building that lifestyle of your own well-being and how that looks for you.
100%. Yes. There's one last thing I wanted to highlight here. The human sense of beauty is, as far as we know, unparalleled. The visual and sonic arts have been highly cultivated. The development of art has been constructive, healthful, and ennobling for humankind. And I would agree, but I would also point out that the development of cheap art has been destructive, not helpful, right? And sort of disempowering for humankind. So you got to actually watch out and be careful what kind of music and what kind of visual and sonic arts you're consuming, because I do think it is consumption. Media, movies. One thing I noticed when I stopped eating animals and I started eating way more fresh plants, my desire to watch movies with violence in them completely vanished. Like, I
Same.
just don't have the stomach or the mind to watch violent scenes in movies, or movies that are going to make my emotions go this way and that way. Right. I want to carefully curate the vibes that I take in, right, and only watch and listen to the stuff that engenders harmony in my life. So I just want to say that as a word of caution. Be careful out there. There's a lot of music, a lot of movies, and a lot of media that's going to lower the vibration.
That's a huge good point, Seth. Huge.
Right on there. And there's articles at the end of here. There was a couple of sections in article number 3 that I really enjoyed: mental and emotional poise, know yourself, how to listen. And I guess maybe we'll end on this. This is the last little piece of advice. This article by Lee Bauer is great. And he reminds us to be aware of what is being said as we listen to other people without the bias of our conditioning. So in other words, being aware without choice is necessary to get the full impact. I must neither agree nor disagree as I listen, right? We always bring with us our biases. And this is just a reminder to listen to what is being said by people around you without attachment, right? And then we're not going to get so reactive, and it will help us listen with more harmony. So that's the end of chapter 4. And the next one is Introduction to Nutritional Science, where it gets deeper into food and into the criteria that foods must meet in order to be nutritional. So I'm looking forward to discussing this one. Y'all, this is an invitation to hop in the Radical Health School, SKOOL.com. Search for Radical Health or click the link below in this YouTube description. And we are going to be discussing chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8, and continuing on through the life science health system. I want to discuss a lot of great texts on natural hygiene, and the school group is where I'm hosting that. So, Blake's in there, and I try to post decently regularly. We're going to be doing lots of stuff, not just natural hygiene, but we're going to talk about foot health soon. We're going to get into some esoteric cosmology, different things on the Bible, and whatever you guys are interested in. Obviously, veganism is a huge part of what I teach as well. So you guys are welcome to come in there. Blake, what do you offer? And why don't you tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, first, thanks so much for having me on, Seth. I love your community. Everybody go check out Radical Health on school.com. That's school with the K. I'm a part of his community. I feel like I'm going to like a college class every time I hang out with Seth, and his delivery, it just helps it. He's such a dang good teacher, man. You really are.
I appreciate that.
My website is called fasting.lifestyle. I have a community. It's called Fasting Academy. And you guys can join my community. And it is weekly group coaching calls. And we're a little cohort of people that are not just doing fasting and cleansing, but also, as we spoke about earlier in this show, working on honing our lifestyle practices in between those bouts of fasting or cleanses. And you can check out my YouTube channel. I have a podcast. It's called the Fasting Lifestyle Podcast. And my YouTube channel is just my name, Blake Herrick. Seth has been on the show. It was an awesome interview that we did together. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. You can always hit me up on Instagram, same first and last name, Blake Herrick, and just DM me with any questions. And yeah, I'd love to help and be of service. So don't feel shy. Just hit me up.
Righteous. Yes, we're both here at your service. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you got any questions, drop them below. If you have topics you want us to discuss, drop it below, and we'll be cranking out more content. So stay in touch, stay tuned. And thanks, Blake, for being with me again on this presentation.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much.
Right on. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning into Radical Health. We'll see you next time.